There are a lot of elements of Christianity that other religions share. For example, Christianity starts foundationally with a belief in God. Other religions have this belief in God, the monotheistic religions. Notice the kind of God I'm talking about here, though. I'm not talking about a force in the universe. I'm talking about a person. And this person is different from that which he created. So it isn't like everything is God, kind of the pantheism of the East, but rather you have a person who creates something other than himself. So there's a distinction between the two. Part of what he created were personal beings, human beings in particular. In addition to all the animals, there are creatures that are different than everything else. And there are other religions who share this as well. Although not all religions really make this clear distinction. I think in Hinduism, you don't have a clear distinction, at least in some forms of Hinduism, between these different kinds of creatures, because you have transmigration of the soul and reincarnation. There's an interchangeability between animals and humans in that regard. But when it comes to Christianity, and Judaism shares this, God has created human beings as something unique and special, made in some sense in his image. Now, since God is not physical, it's not in the physical body here, but there's some immaterial feature of human beings that sets them apart from all other creatures. There's another observation that can be made about human beings from the perspective of the Christian and biblical worldview, and that is that human beings are both noble and cruel, to use the language of Francis Schaeffer. There's a certain nobility and dignity of human beings that sets them above the rest of the animal kingdom, and we can see this when we see human beings, on their best behavior, as it were, the kinds of great works of art they produce, the great humanitarian gestures that they do, and we see this and we think human beings are special. On the other hand, human beings can be terribly cruel. There's something twisted and broken about human beings. So we have this anomaly. This is a view of Christianity that is obvious in the world when we look around us. We see this contradiction almost, the goodness, the dignity, and the cruelty, the badness of human beings. And the biblical worldview helps us to make sense of this. Man was created with nobility, made in the image of God, but because of rebellion against God, something happened. Something got broken. Something got twisted. And a twisted and broken human being leads to a twisted and broken world. But there's hope. God didn't just leave it at that, though he might have. Out of love, he reached down with a rescue effort. And the rescue effort wasn't just to toss some teaching our way and hope that we would live better lives, but the effort entailed, and this is where Christianity is absolutely unique, the effort entailed God becoming a man himself to communicate in the most clear form possible his intentions and desires, and to make a sacrificial provision for pardon for man's crimes against God. And so the incarnation, people have heard this word, that's what it means, God becoming a man in Jesus. That's unique. And what Jesus did then was to take the penalty for the crimes of men upon himself so that human beings could be freed. He took the rap for their crimes against God so that those who put their trust in him then could receive the pardon that the Father offered. And this is another unique element. Not only does God come down to reach out to man, but he gives him a free pardon of his crimes. The solution to the problem is not in making man better. Okay, let's make up for past deeds gone bad. Now, that isn't going to work. The solution is grace, is an act of unmerited mercy on God's part. It is not by any moral behavior that I qualify for salvation. It is actually my sins, my crimes against God that qualify me for pardon and rescue. And it's a rescue that God is willing to do graciously as we respond to that gift.
Greg Kokel here was describing what Christianity is. The question that we have is, does this make sense? Are there reasons to believe that what he actually said is true? A lot of people don't think so. A lot of people think Christians are stupid for believing in the Bible or believing that what he was just describing. Is that true? Well, we'll find out in the next 8 weeks if there are some good reasons for thinking that Christianity actually is true, that Jesus had the right take on reality. And this might be helpful to you as you encounter various challenges from the world that we see all the time. If you're just paying attention to the movies, to the TV, to news stories, to conversation around the water cooler, you find that a Christian worldview, the view of reality that Jesus had, is not well accepted these days, and in fact is assumed false. The first idea has to do with, is there any such thing as true and false? Or what does that mean? And that's the subject for today. I have a guest that I often invite to come in. And this guest is Professor Hardnaga. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Steve invited me to come this morning to address you as part of my Science 101 series. And what I'd like to just open up with is, he told me that most of you are Christians. I'd just like a show of hands. How many of you believe in God? Okay. Just about everybody. Okay. There's a photographer in the back who doesn't, but well, my question is, which God is it that you believe in? Do you believe in Zeus? Thor? Okay. Jehovah? Why would you pick one God over another? I mean, they're all kind of out there ready. We have choices. Everyone has their own traditions, their own religions, and so forth. I think it's all nonsense, personally. But, people have their various reasons for believing in gods. It helps make them feel better. It helps them deal with life, the challenges that come up. A useful fiction is sometimes how it's put, belief in God. Religion, an opiate for the masses, keep everyone under control. In college, however, my objective for you, my students, is to help liberate you from these myths so that you can have more freedom to be autonomously yourself and to strive for everything that you are capable of doing without being weighed down by superstition. So, you can look forward to this next semester. That's what we have, that's what I'm going to do with you. And just to start out, I want to point out that there's two different types of truth that people tend to have. One has to do with knowledge and facts. It's testable. It relies on evidence. It's objective and scientific. This is the scientific view of truth. Okay? We actually have knowledge through gaining facts by evidence that's testable, that's solid. Now, there's another way of looking at truth, and that's this. Instead of knowledge, we have faith. Instead of facts, we rely on feelings. Not testable. Instead of evidence, we have beliefs about things. Instead of objective, solid, count on, we have subjective, whatever you feel like. And superstition rather than science. And this is the religious view. So let me ask you, which would you rather rely on?
Like my college professor in psychology.
Yeah, well, thank you.
40 years ago.
Okay. Which would you rather rely on? Okay, well, I'm putting my bets on this side. I'm going to go with science. In fact, I'm going to say that science, the scientific method, science is the only way you can really achieve reliable knowledge. Science is the only way to gain knowledge. These other things, they may make you feel good. That's not knowledge. Science is the only means by which we can reliably know anything. Okay? Well, thank you. I'll turn it back over to to Steve and we'll see what he can do with that. Well, thank you, Professor. Yes, yes. All right, so now it's time for you to put on your thinking cap. Professor Hardnoggin just made this assertion. Science is the only means by which we can reliably know anything. There is actually a fatal flaw in the professor's reasoning. Can you spot what it is? I'm going to stand back and see what you say.
Doesn't allow for God.
That's right, doesn't allow for God. So what? I'm just talking about his reasoning. Look at this statement. Science is the only means by which we can reliably know anything. What scientific method did he use to arrive at this knowledge? He didn't. That's the flaw, is that the test that he brings to this, his statement doesn't pass its own test. The statement is self-defeating. And this is one of those flaws in reasoning that, that by the end of this 8 weeks, I hope that you will be more attuned to detect, because these kind of things happen all the time. And they go by and nobody even thinks about them or notices them. A lot of these ideas and assertions are self-defeating. So, Cole and Jeff, you get an A today. Because Cole said, how did he come to know this? Okay, it wasn't through science. There must be other ways of acquiring knowledge, which is what Jeff actually said. You guys weren't in on this, were you? Okay. Now, this morning we're talking about truth and faith. Faith is a concept that's thrown around in the culture a lot. And I always cringe when I hear people talk about faith. Because the popular view of faith is this: believing something you know isn't true. That's what people think when we talk about faith. You know, you just got to believe something. It's not biblical faith. Okay? This is not Jesus' view of faith. But it's our culture's view of faith. How often do I hear somebody say, well, everybody's just got to believe in something? Have you heard that? Okay. You know, you have your beliefs, he has his beliefs, they're all good. You know, as long as you believe in something. Well, I don't think so. I think it matters what you believe in, and that a blind leap or wishful thinking is not what faith is. In fact, that puts the focus on me, on my own experience and what I want to do, rather than what I'm trying to rely on and have faith in. Okay, so let's first talk about straightening out what we mean by faith, because Christians and church talk a lot about faith, and my hunch is that half the people sitting in the pews have the wrong idea of what we're talking about. So what is biblical faith? Here's my definition. I want you to memorize it, okay? Write this down. Faith is living according to what you have good reasons to believe is true. Biblical faith is living according to what you have good reasons to believe is true. Now, there are a couple parts to that. First is living according to. Okay, so it's doing something. A synonym for biblical faith is active trust. When Jesus said, follow me, believe in me, trust me, all these things, he's asking people to do the same thing. It's actively trust him. Meaning not just to sit back and agree with him, but to do what he says, to follow him, to act as though what he says is really true. Now, we have good examples of this in our life. You do it all the time. And here's one. If you're anyone from Minnesota, No, nobody from Minnesota. Well, there's an ice fisherman in Minnesota, okay? And he goes out there in the winter and he cuts a hole in the ice. Well, to do that, he has to walk over the ice. He's counting on that ice being thick enough to hold him. Sometimes they even drive their cars out there. Now, does it matter how thick the ice actually is? I mean, actually is. If it's a half an inch thick, what's going to happen when he goes out there? If it's a foot thick, what's going to happen? Well, it's a foot thick. So what makes the difference is the trustworthiness of the object. So in the biblical view of faith, the object of what you're trusting makes all the difference in the world. Not how much faith you have. Jesus said you can have faith the size of a mustard seed. Okay, you can't measure, you can't pull out your tape measure, but you know what he's talking about. It doesn't matter how much faith you have. It matters what you have faith in. And it doesn't matter if you're doubting. Everybody doubts. I doubt. What matters is if you have enough confidence and trust to act on that. It's just like, the child jumping off the wall into his father's arms. You got to do it. Doesn't matter if you're nervous about it. You do it. Now here's a popular view of another popular view of faith that's wrong. So here's an airplane diagram. We got all the parts labeled. We got a manual that tells us everything about how this airplane works. And you say, yep, I believe that airplane works. I believe that it can fly, and if I were to get on it, it would take me from here to New York. But I don't get on it. I just read the manual and, talk about it and say, yep, I agree. But I don't get on the plane. That's what James calls dead faith. You agree with it, but you don't act that way. Now, another way of looking at faith is this. You say, yeah, I'm going to get on this plane. I'm just going to believe. If I believe hard enough, it'll work. It'll get me to New York. Is that going to work? No. So that's the other mistake, blind faith. We don't want dead faith. We don't want blind faith. We want biblical faith, which is what? Read from your note. Okay, Haley, say it louder. Okay. Living, so acting on it, behaving that way, living according to what you have good reasons to believe is true. You got to have reasons. You can't just have the feeling of faith. So that's what that's why we're doing this class, is to give you all reasons, or more reasons than you have already. Okay? Now, our culture has strange ideas about truth. Jesus said, I am the truth. Okay, well, what did he mean by that? Here's a little quiz. We'll do it all together. Tell me if this statement is true. How many says that this statement is true? Raise your hand. Okay. How about this statement? Bluebell is the best tasting ice cream. Who would say it was true? Okay. There we go. One person got it right. Okay. All right. We have disagreement on that. Can you all see this, by the way? Cole, can you see this okay? Okay. And Lisa can see it because she raised her hand. How about this? Is this true? Presents should be opened on Christmas Eve. How many say that's true?
All the children.
How many say it's false? And the rest of you are wishy-washy and you're just not going to take a position, right? Okay. I have a point to this. Jesus Christ rose from the dead. How many say it's true? Okay. Abortion is wrong. How many say that's true? Okay. Marriage is only between a man and a woman. How many say that's true? Okay. Now, you may have noticed a difference between these questions. The questions are of two different kinds. Who can spot what the different categories of questions are that are in here? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Good. So one has to do with me, and another one has to do with not me. Okay, so water is H2O. Does that have to do with me? No. Regardless of what I think about it, water is two hydrogens and one oxygen, no matter what. I can think differently. I can have a different opinion. It doesn't matter about me. However, what about this one? Presents should be opened on Christmas Eve. Is that about me, or is that about something else? Rebecca would say that's about me. Okay? This is the difference between an objective and a subjective truth claim. Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Is that an objective or a subjective that's about me, the subject, or an objective claim that's about something else? According to our culture nowadays, all religious claims are subjective. So this may be true for you. If you're a Christian, Jesus Christ rose from the dead. But if you're a Muslim, that's not true. And each is equivalent. In fact, if you're a Muslim, Jesus Christ didn't even die on the cross. This is a little more obvious. You know, is abortion wrong or right? Or doesn't matter? Well, you know, people disagree about this. Since people disagree, that must mean that nobody's right. Does that follow? Well, maybe, not necessarily. So moral claims, religious claims or moral claims, nowadays are treated as subjective. It depends on the person. And if you have an opinion about this, well, that's fine. But somebody else may have a different opinion about it, and they're just as right as you are. I mean, their opinion and your opinion are equivalent. You can't say one person's right and the other person is wrong. In fact, that's intolerant, which is the worst sin nowadays. Okay? If all moral things are fine except intolerance, you know, that's the moral crime that is inexcusable nowadays. When we say something is true, what we mean is that it actually matches reality. Okay, so I say that this microphone is on the table. Is that true? Well, if the microphone is actually on the table, yes, it's true. It matches reality. If it's not on the table, it's false. That's what we mean by truth. And even if, you know, somebody muddies the water and say, well, you know, it all depends on your perception and your society colors how you're viewing things, and you know, truth is constructed by your social system and by your experience and so forth. The garden variety of truth, when anybody thinks about the question of whether a statement is true or not, is this: does it match reality or not? And that's what we mean by truth. Now there's two different kinds of truth that we just illustrated. One is objective and the other is subjective. You may have heard the term absolute truth being thrown around. Absolute truth, the way people use it, means objective truth. Now I would suggest not using that term. You know, just get rid of the term absolute truth because it confuses people. You know, sometimes people think, well, it means you have to be absolutely certain of something. That's not what it is. That's why I prefer the concept of objective truth. An object is something that's out there for everybody to see. Okay? It's not a part of me. It's there. That's an object. So the fact that this candle is here is an objective truth statement. We discover it. We look around and we find out that. Okay, it's public. All of you can see it too. It's not just my own idea. Everybody can see it. Okay, so that's an objective truth. A subjective truth is about me. A subjective truth would be, this candle smells good. Okay? I'm talking about my own experience. I'm talking about something that you don't have access to, which is the perception that I have in my own mind. Now you can come up and smell it, and some of you may think it smells good, and some of you may think it doesn't. Those are your subjective experiences. You're the subject, okay? Now, the reason I'm making such a big deal about this, objective and subjective, is because nowadays, all religious and moral truth are put in the subjective category. So whenever you hear in the media anyone talk about religion or morality, just keep in mind that the kind of truth that they have in mind is subjective. It's not objective. However, as Christians, we don't go for that. The Christian worldview is that Jesus actually had the right take on reality, and that what he says about religious or moral subjects is objectively true. There's a big distinction. And when you're conversing with somebody about religious or moral issues and they're making a claim or you're making a claim or they object to your claim about something, keep in mind that they probably have this subjective view. So in their mind, if you say that abortion is wrong, you're violating the moral code of tolerance, because nobody could be right about this. Everyone's got their own idea. It's a subjective truth claim. And so for you to come out and assert that this is objectively the case, violates, their idea of what's proper. I'm saying that some religious and moral truth claims are objective. That's the Christian view. Not all, but at least some are. So if it's objective, I said one of the aspects of being objective is that it's public, and that, in principle anyway, it's testable. So we'll look at some of these other religious truth claims here. How about this one? All is spirit and the material world is an illusion. Now, is that testable? I can't think of how to test that. So that's a religious statement. Sounds good. It's not testable. How about this one? There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Okay. A well-known religious assertion. Can we test that? No, not really. How about this? Christ died, was buried, was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. In principle, is that testable? Yeah. It's making an historical claim. You can interview witnesses. You can look for forensic evidence, if you were back there. So in principle, this is a claim that has to do with an event in history that's testable by different means. Illustrating the difference between Christianity and the objective kind of claims that Christians make versus other religions. Now there's a big confusion, I think, about the word belief, just like about faith. People say, well, I have my beliefs, therefore, you can't criticize me, because everyone is entitled to their own beliefs. Well, I guess so. Everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. What do they mean by that, though? I believe in leprechauns. Well, okay. Or Zeus. You know, Professor Hardnoggin gets a big kick out of Christians who believe in some kind of, you know, deity. He puts it on the same level as believing in leprechauns. So beliefs is not having a belief is not necessarily virtuous. But we have a big confusion about what we mean by beliefs. Just like we have a confusion about what we mean by faith. So this is kind of a shorthand set of definitions that I found very helpful, may be helpful for you. I got it from Greg Kokel again, who's a source of a lot of my material. So reality is the way things are. Okay? Reality is the way things are. My belief is the way that I think things are. It may be accurate, it may not be. But it's my belief about reality. The truth is when I'm right, when my belief is accurate. And faith is when I act on what I believe to be true. So belief and faith are not the same thing. Reality, there is a way things are. Okay? Some would deny that, curiously. But I'm saying there is a way things actually are. And I have beliefs about that. If my beliefs are correct, then they're true. But that isn't faith yet. Faith is when I actually act according to what I believe is true. But think about what biblical faith is and how it would apply in each of these situations, okay? So first one, you're a Christian now. You keep beating yourself up because of something selfish you did that hurt another person. And you keep thinking about it, you know, and oh man, why did I do that? Over and over again. Okay, what would biblical faith do in that kind of circumstance? Second one, your history professor dismisses the Bible as not historically or scientifically accurate. Yeah, the Bible was written by men thousands of years ago. It's just another old book. It's religious, has a bunch of myths. You can't really rely on it as history. Okay, so how would biblical faith respond in that kind of situation? Third one, your mom has cancer and is not getting better even though you pray for healing. How does biblical faith respond? Fourth, you are deeply hurt by a pastor or another church leader. Fifth, you feel like you married the wrong person because you're in love with somebody else. Now these are real situations that people encounter. And what I want you to do right now, among yourselves at the table, is talk about how biblical faith would respond to each of these situations.